Protesters in the U.S. are crying out for cities to defund the police, but what does that really mean? My colleague Asieh Namdar spoke to Professor Carlton Waterhouse from Howard University.
Professor Waterhouse, we've heard this term defunding the police so much in recent days and weeks. Can you explain to us what that means exactly? Does it mean taking funding away from the police? Does it mean disbanding, dismantling all the police departments and allocating those resources to communities in need? What does that mean exactly?
It varies, right? So there's a kind of a continuum of different activists' belief about what should happen with regards to policing. So there are some who would argue that we should completely abolish the police, and others who said we should defund the police, and some who said we should dismantle the police. So let me try to break each of those down if you don't mind. So the idea of defunding the police generally means we should reallocate the funds that are used for policing towards the actual services that are needed by communities. So that would mean providing services for people who are homeless, for people who are suffering from mental illness, for people who are dealing with drug addiction, for people who have had cars break down, right? The kinds of things that police actually use the majority of their time doing. And persons who make that advocacy often will argue that we're trying to prevent harms, and sometimes police are actually engaged in contributing to harms rather than actually solving harms. And so they believe that by putting funds towards prevention, we actually will reduce crime. And those who argue for abolishing police really, I think, argue that the police force historically has been such a racist institution, and that it has been an institution that has rarely provided protection for the poor and rarely provided protection for people of color, so that the police force is incapable of actually providing protection for all citizens. While it may be effective for wealthy white folks, it doesn't provide protection for all citizens.
So, Professor, has this kind of thing, any of these variations or scenarios you explain, has anything like this, have any of them been done in any U.S. city?
So in the U.S. cities, I don't know per se, but you might want to think about some small towns, right, who kind of have a sheriff, but they don't really have a police force per se, right? And they don't necessarily feel the need to have a police force. So it's not that police forces have been defunded per se around these issues, but there are places where we see that they don't have robust police forces, and they seem to be able to live their lives in a way that is acceptable and comfortable for them. Now, we have had the Camden police force, which was dismantled and restarted, right? But that was based on budgetary constraints rather than kind of a political or philosophical position.
What about what we're seeing in Minneapolis today? They have a terrible reputation of racism. The police budget this year, why would they need that kind of budget? What does that money go to?
I think like most employers, a lot of money goes to actually paying for personnel, right? So you've got salaries, you've got benefits, then you also have insurance policies for when the police go overboard and they get sued successfully for big multi-million-dollar claims. Then you have equipment, and then you have guns, you have ammunition.
I mean, in all honesty, should that money, at least some of it, be allocated to communities that are suffering?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in fact, in all honesty, if we think about all of our major police forces, we have spent all of our money on a possible cure rather than putting it into education, into health, and into social services.
And we certainly appreciate your take, your perspective, Professor Carlton Waterhouse. Thank you so much.